Thank you for joining me today for a walk in the garden. It's a hot one. We're in the middle of one of our summer heat waves. Actually, we aren't in the middle yet, we're at the beginning. We will be having 3 more days, they tell us, of temperatures close to 90 degrees, if not over. So we're trying to stay in the shade a little bit today as we film this show. I'm Liz Davey, and this is a walk in the garden. And I'm in my herb garden, and it is the middle of August, almost the middle of August, and the herbs have all come up and are ready to be used. We've had a lot of rain this summer. Usually by now my herb garden is looking really, really sad because I don't usually get too much water on it. Our watering bans, when it's been really dry, have prevented me from doing as much watering as the herb garden really needs. But this year things are doing pretty well because we've had sufficient rain almost every week. We've gotten at least an inch every week since about the end of June. So things are doing well, and we have lots of lemon herbs, lemon balm, lime balm, lemon thyme, lime thyme, the various herbs that I use as insecticide bundles in my shed, aromatic herbs, oregano, tarragon, scented geraniums, which are kind of fun. And I have a bay leaf, and I bought this spring, and it's put on some new growth, and I'm very happy with it. I've left it in the pot because it will need to come in this winter. And if we do have some dry days, and even these hot days, I probably will give that one some extra water. Anything in a pot, even though we've had sufficient rain, will dry out rather quickly, so you need to keep watering those items. Right now is the time to start picking things. We're still able to pick chives, and they're even trying to put on some more blossoms, and any of the other herbs can be picked. I have mint, plenty of mint, and sage, and I'm going to be picking the sage for drying. Sage is one of the herbs, along with oregano, that dries really well as a preservation method, and it can be used throughout the winter, and it goes so well in so many savory dishes. Pork, turkey, even some chicken dishes, but particularly pork and turkey. We think of turkey stuffing with sage. So I've got my rubber band here, and I'll just rubber band this. And then take it in and hang it up until the leaves have completely dried. You need to take it into a room that is dry. Again, with the high humidity, you don't want to leave it out in a garage, open garage or shed, where it won't properly dry. So inside in a cool, dark place, and you'll have plenty of sage for your Thanksgiving stuffing. Have a lot of thyme over here also to pick, and the garlic chives are now putting on their blossoms. And they are a pink or white blossom on garlic chives. The regular chives bloom earlier in the season, although they're trying to put on a few more blossoms now, thanks to all the rain. But the garlic chives come into bloom right now. So we don't have a lot of color in this garden, but we do have a lot of flavor. So I enjoy coming out right before dinner as I'm fixing my dinner and picking the herb that I need to add to my menu that evening. Let's go over to the perennial garden now. The perennial garden, we're having the last of the oriental lilies. I have white ones and several shades of pink. This is a pink oriental lily. They're the tallest ones and also the latest ones to bloom. And they really add a lot of color to the garden. They're a nice focal point. I've got heliopsis in bloom, and behind that some echinacea and platycodon. This is a house plant that I've moved out. Every once in a while with the bulbs, suddenly the foliage has wilted and I've been able to take it out. So I wanted to put in something, and these are house plants or plants that I keep inside over the winter. And this one is a pineapple lily, and it will go dormant in the winter, and I'll keep it in an unheated bedroom for the winter without any leaves. But it has interesting blossoms. They look like little pineapples, sort of. And that's where it gets its common name of pineapple lily. The scientific name is Eucomus, and they come in pink or white, and they're ordered at the same time you order your flowering bulbs for fall or spring. I also have some Cleome that is coming up here. I replanted that. Cleome is an annual flower. I've added a few annuals here and there to give a little needed color once many of the perennials are finished. This is a daylily, which is finished blooming, and we're going to take off any of the bloomscapes from the daylily, and I try to take off also some of the dead foliage. Daylilies, I kind of have a love-hate relationship. I love them when they're blooming, but once they've already finished, if they're not a rebloomer, and not too many of them will rebloom a lot, then they don't look too great in the garden. They and also bearded iris can be clipped down if they get really ugly, and they will form a little bit of new foliage that looks a little nicer. So I may do that with this one because the leaves are rather unsightly. Here's something we have on the lily, however. It's a walking stick. And I don't know if the camera can get a good view of this or not. Harmless little insect. Might eat some aphids. But they're an interesting thing to find on your plants. And you can see how well they're camouflaged with this lily foliage. He's upside down right now. You able to get a shot of that one? Good. We'll leave him be to his work. Moving along, I've also added pots of Nicotiana, and I can deadhead that. As I go through the garden, I try to get out here every day or two, even when it's hot. And when it's hot, I try to come out early in the morning. It's the best time to do garden work. There's always a little weeding to do, especially around the edges, and especially with all the rain we've been getting, and deadheading. And if I deadhead this one, it may well rebloom into fall. This is an annual that I planted in pots so that I have it coming up, and I can put those pots out here. The phlox is currently blooming, and I have some goldenrod in here that will bloom a little later. I cut it back earlier so that it would bloom later, so that we have something in bloom in September and maybe October. The asters are starting to put buds on, and they'll be in bloom in the next month or so. Moving down here, there's an empty spot, but it isn't really empty because it's where a poppy was, and the poppy foliage dies back in summer. It will come back, however, in the fall, so we have to leave the space open for that foliage to come up and form a tuft of foliage that will take it through to winter. The roses are putting on their second bloom, and I'll deadhead this one and a few more. Again, watch for little beetles. They can be picked off and put into a jar of soapy water. I haven't had too much trouble with Japanese beetle. At one point we added BT to the lawn, and it has helped tremendously with the Japanese beetles. Haven't had too many since. I guess it colonized and has done a good job keeping them away. I see one or two, but not many at all. I've added some other plants. This is an annual that I purchased, and it's a celosa, and I'm going to water it right now. I planted that in the last couple days. And this, again, to add a little color to the garden. Needed a little something more than the black-eyed Susans and a few roses. Roses are, as I said, doing their second larger bloom about now and into later this month and maybe even early September. My butterfly weed is finished. It was nice and orange and pretty, but it's now formed seed pods. And I will be able to collect the seeds and share them, or plant them somewhere else, or let the birds have them as time goes by. Have more asters back here, and it's time to make some garden notes as you go through your garden. The aster needed support, which I did not give it. Many of my plants I have in support rings or cut down tomato cages. The aster did not get one. I thought it was going to stand up a little straighter. Instead, it's flopping all over. So next year it will get a support and be a little better behaved instead of being like a jungle in there. Again, I have another rose in back which may have a few more blooms, and I've been deadheading the blue phlox and in hopes that it too will have some more blooms on it before we're finished. Any new plants, again, need some water to get through any really hot, dry, and this is a clematis that's a year old, but I want to make sure it doesn't dry out. I've lost them before because they did get too dry. I'm going to move down this way, and this is an allium, and it's Allium millennium, and it's one of the later alliums. Many of them bloom in the spring or early summer. This one blooms about now and really adds a lot of color to the garden. I had been told that rabbits never bother this plant, nor deer. However, rabbits have enjoyed it this year. Someone forgot to tell the rabbits, I guess. Again, I have more asters here, and I also put in some annual marigolds to take the place of the bulbs that were once there. They'll be coming out in the fall, and they should be blooming. Again, the rabbits found those delightful, so I have added some dried blood around the marigolds, and also the aster. The edges of the aster were getting nibbled too. So I have a nice little bunny that comes to visit, and I would prefer that he just sticks to the clover in the lawn. And hopefully by adding the dried blood, he'll get the idea. In back we have some echinops. Those are the blue globe flowers, and if you pick them right about now, they will dry nicely and can be used in fall and winter arrangements. I kind of like to leave them in the garden. They add, again, a bit of color. They also are very bee friendly. I've got honeybees on both the allium and the echinops. Lots of them. Someone has a hive nearby, evidently. There are also some native bees. And bumblebees. We just have a pollinator feast right here. The chrysanthemums that I planted several years ago, this one I have been pinching it back. Again, using the holidays as a guide. Mother's Day, Father's Day, 4th of July, and, well, 4th of July is the last one, so I have to think about Memorial Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, and 4th of July is when you pinch back your mums. And this one is now starting to bud and will be much fuller and shorter by being pinched back at those intervals. This daylily is finished, starting to set seed, so I'm going to cut this off. This is a red daylily called Red Returns, and it's a lot like Happy Returns, only it has red flowers. And I'm hoping by cutting these bloom stalks back and taking out some of this browning foliage, that it will return and give me a few more blooms before the season is over. Back to my watering can. While I was at the garden center, I purchased a couple mums, and I'm going to leave them in the pots this year and just move them around to where I need a little extra color. And now's the time to get them, and we'll keep them watered. And they should add a lot of color in the next month or so. Unfortunately, though they're labeled hardy mums, they are not. Don't expect this one to return even if you plant it in the garden. It won't. At least it's unlikely to. If you want your chrysanthemums to return, you need to find a place that's selling small ones in the spring and let them mature throughout the season. Lots of white phlox, bee balm. I've been deadheading the bee balm, and it has been responding by giving me a few more blooms. And we have more black-eyed Susans, always pretty. Throughout the garden, I've added a few annuals. I have some zinnias in some of the other spots, another mum up the way. Just trying to keep color in the garden and something in bloom pretty much every season of the year. Now let's move into the vegetable garden and see what's happening there, which is quite a lot. The rain has really been good for my vegetable garden, and things are growing pretty well. In the foreground we have the Brussels sprouts, which are still growing, and they'll be getting taller up until September. I've had a few problems with the white cabbage moth butterflies, as you can probably see. They're flitting around. I have been spraying those with some spinosad, which helps keep the caterpillars down, and I do have a few holes in the leaves, but hopefully not too many, and we'll get some sprouts. I use the pesticide spinosad. It is safe for organic gardening. However, you do have to be careful. Even though they say safe, it will kill bees, and so you want to use it either late in the night or very early in the morning so that you don't injure the bees. This is cilantro, which is going to seed and will soon be cut for pesto. And then I have my basils right here, and I have been making pesto. We're going to use some pesto today. I have a few hot peppers in here which have needed a little more sun, though one of them is producing the tiny hot peppers, which is what it was supposed to do. The big plant over on this side is a tomatillo. And the first year I planted tomatillos, I planted 6. And I had a lot of tomatillos. And the tomatillo is an interesting plant. It forms inside this little balloon. And those little balloons will fill up with the fruit, and in a month or so they will be popping open or just getting very full, and that's when you can pick them and use them. And they make a great salsa and some chicken dishes, but you don't really want 2 or 3 bushels of them. At least in my house you don't. So one plant is plenty for me. I have regular basil, lemon basil, and again, they've done quite well. I also have an opal basil down front, which is a purple color. It looks really great with red or yellow tomatoes in a salad with little goat cheese and maybe some toast. And then we have broccoli. And my broccoli is a little late this year. I got it in a little late. I have gotten at least 1 head from it, and other heads are forming. I don't know how this really hot weather will affect it. My tomatoes, again, could use more sun. They're not the best tomatoes I've ever had, that's for sure. They're starting to ripen up, but it's been slow, and I've been very thankful for the farmer's market where I can get some there as well to augment the supply. Green beans have done extremely well. I have green and yellow beans up this way, and they have been a fine crop, and they're still ready to go. For a while I was picking them every other day. Now we're down to about once a week, but I see a lot of blossoms, so I suspect with the increased sun and humidity and rain, we will have another good crop of beans. I've been able to put some of them in the freezer to save for winter, which is what I like to do. The tea peas, I've got one over there and one over here, are both growing cucumbers. And we're getting quite a few cucumbers. Again, cucumbers like the moisture that they've been getting. So I've been getting those, and I've been using them for pickles and also just slicing. And we'll do some things when we get in the kitchen with those today. Carrots, perpetual spinach, Swiss chard, and this is kale. All of those can be used right now. Again, I do spray the kale because I don't really want to have extra livestock on it when I pick it. I use a lot of it raw in salad, and I also freeze some for winter use in soups and stews. It's very nice with some of those dishes to add some of the kale, especially some of the Italian dishes call for kale or escarole. My lettuce is about gone. We're on the last dregs of the first lettuce, and that's surprising. Again, all of the rain has helped with that to keep it from going to seed too fast, but I will have that pulled within another week. My flowers are doing well. The zinnias have made a lot of nice bouquets to bring inside, and we've really enjoyed them. Beyond the zinnias are my squash, And the squash I planted after I removed the old strawberry plants. We enjoyed our strawberries in May, and then the old plants were pulled. I had already planted further over a new row of strawberries, 25 of them I believe, yeah, and they are growing well and forming runners now. But the old strawberries came out, and in their place I planted squash. And usually by now I have a lot of squash borers and other insects on the squash. But by planting it a little later, it came along quite fast. And I'm now harvesting yellow squash and zucchini regularly. And I haven't had too much insect damage. I think I will delay planting my squash again next year. It seems to have worked quite well. The area further down around the new strawberry plants, there are a few rows in there with tiny plants. I've replanted my lettuce, cilantro, some kale, and some arugula, and those will be my fall crops. They've already come up an inch or so, and I have to make sure if we do get a dry season that I keep those watered. So far, we've been just fine. I also planted some new scallions. I had saved some of the onion sets, so we'll have some scallions in the fall too. The rest of the garden over there is kind of a wild area right now. I have cilantro that is going to seed, which came up from last year's plants, and also a lot of dill, which again reseeded in the garden. I've been picking the dill to use in my pickles, and keeping it in the garden, but very shortly I will be picking the cilantro so that it doesn't go to seed too much for next year. I wouldn't mind having a little, but I don't want too much of it to fill the area around the strawberries. I have two kinds of red raspberries, and the first kind, which is at this end, is already finished for the year, and you can see some of the stalks are already dying back. Those will be cut and burned in the spring, if not cut in the fall. Those are finished, and new stalks are growing, which will provide next year's crop. The ones at the other end, I cut back to the ground each year, and they bloom later. And those are in fruit right now. I'm not getting as many as I would like because I like those about best. So I think I'll be planting a few more plants down in that corner in the coming spring. It's time to make some notes on what you'd like to do differently. As I said in the herb or perennial garden and herb garden, make your notes now, and then you'll know what you need to do in the spring. What plants you need to order, which ones you need to support, which ones you need to divide, and which ones you think might do better in another location. This is the time to record it. Otherwise, by spring, you'll have forgotten all about it if you're like me, and you won't be ready to do the work. Anyway, I finally got my scarecrow in the garden. I don't think she's doing much work, but she is there, and perhaps she'll keep a few birds away. Her lipstick ran a little bit, but other than that, she's looking pretty good. A trip to the dollar store is a good way to make a scarecrow. For a couple of dollars, you can have a very smart looking scarecrow to guard your crops. I constructed the frame of that scarecrow based on my own body measurements, my arms particularly, and my shoulder width, because I had no idea what to do. It's a wooden frame underneath. And so I've even had people walk by from a distance. I think they don't have such good eyesight, perhaps, but they do try to talk to it thinking it's me. So if they get closer, it's pretty obvious it's not me. So, okay, now let's close up the garden again so that we won't have any invaders from deer and raccoons and woodchucks, and head out into the shade garden where it's a lot more comfortable on a day like this. This is a planter in a partial shade, and I have a number of different planters around that I like to fill in the summer. It gets expensive if you're buying plants for all of them. These are all coleus, which is a plant that likes part shade really well. And there are 6 different plants, varieties in this container, but I only bought one this year. I bought the red one. That's a new one for me. Each year I buy a new one, and then I will take cuttings, and that will be done either the end of this month or into next month, probably more into next month. I will pinch off a growing tip, use some planting hormone, put it into compost or potting soil, and then this will develop into a new plant. These will be kept over the winter, and then in the spring I can plant them out again. During the summer, after I've planted them out, they don't look that great, quite frankly. But if I keep pinching out the very center portion of each plant, it makes more plants. As you can see on this one particularly, I'm getting two new stems in this red one at this point where I've pinched it, and down further more, so they become more bushy as you go. And I will do that with each of my varieties, taking 3 or 4 cuttings of each one, and hopefully I have as good a luck growing them indoors as I did in past years, and I can continue the show and perhaps add even another one next year to the varieties, or perhaps some other pots. I've even been able to put them in other pots in single varieties. And it's kind of fun to do, kind of fun to keep them. They grow very easily and they root very easily. So if you're growing coleus, it's a shame not to try to keep them going for a while. Bringing in whole plants doesn't work as well. Just the cuttings seem to do better because they stay smaller. Bringing in like the whole planter, it would not survive the winter, I don't think. But the individual cuttings, and that they're only, just a couple inches, but they will progress and do quite well. And again, you can keep pinching them during the winter and the plants will bush out. Hydrangeas are now in bloom. This is an oak leaf hydrangea. I particularly like that variety. It's a more native one. And the other hydrangeas, blue and white panicle hydrangeas, are now available too. Let's move into the shade garden a little bit more. I have quite a few shade plants in my shade garden, and a lot of them are hosta. And hosta is a pretty good plant for the shade garden, as long as you can keep the deer and the slugs away from it, which I use slug pellets, the non-toxic ones, and also deer spray, and do pretty well. If you start early, you should be able to do a good job keeping the deer away. They're in bloom right now, and I have different hosta varieties, and they bloom at many different times. Some of them are all finished, others are just coming into bloom. Once they've finished blooming, as this one has, I cut off the old bloomscapes and compost them. They're kind of unsightly if you leave them, and the plants just look better without them. In fact, some people prefer just the green and don't let them bloom at all. But I do like the blooms. Some are white, some are purple, some are a little striped, and I do like them. So I leave them as long as they're in bloom. But once they're finished, they're finished. And I'll cut them off. There's no reason for them to go to seed, because we want them to bloom next year and expand to fill our shade area. The rest of the shade garden gets a little bit of sun here and there, just enough to keep the plants happy. Now let's walk down by the fish pond and see what's going on there. The fish have been really active, and when they're active, they're really hungry. And they now know that when I stand here, I often have food for them. So they'll come right over to this corner, which is where I do put their food. And again, they'll be eating 3 times a day or more when the temperatures are this hot. It's been hard to keep the pond in good shape this year, particularly because of all the rain we've had. At times I've had water outside the pond as well as in it. It's been that heavy a rain. I was worried in May about the pond plants over there, the elephant ears, that I had carried over from last year. And I actually bought a new one because I did not think that the existing ones were going to do very much this year. However, by using an aquatic plant fertilizer, and the water that they like has been sufficient, and they've done really well. So I have now 4 plants instead of the 3 that I started with. Now, I guess I had, I had 3, and then I added another one. So I have 4 of those, and I'll consider what I'm going to do with them this fall, whether I'm going to let them go dormant or try to keep at least a little life in them over the winter. Again, I add one of these aquatic plant tablets. They're a little tablet type. Just push it into the soil about once a month. And I'll be doing that later this week, and just push it in. While I was buying the chrysanthemums the other day, I happened to get a plant for back here that I'd wanted. I saw a perennial, and most of the things that I bought the other day were annuals, which will have a short life. But I'm hoping this one has a long life. It's a cardinal flower, and it's a lobelia. It's a native plant which likes wetter spaces, and I'm going to be planting that out here near the pond, the other side of the pond, and hope that it is in conditions that it likes. It does like a little bit of sun, so I'm hoping I can find a spot that's just right for it. It may get moved around a few times before it finds that spot that it succeeds. It will have tall red blooms in the late summer, early fall. If you haven't ordered your bulbs yet, the bulb catalogs are out. The bulbs are all online. It's very easy to order bulbs for fall planting for spring flowers. And that also includes garlic. And I was surprised that the garlic is really going fast on the site that I generally use when I went to order it a couple weeks ago. But I have plenty of garlic, and I will use some of it in my garden. This is the garlic that I grew, and I harvested it at the end of July. You see we have nice garlic cloves, and I've had it in my shed. There's a whole area on the table in there where it's in to dry. And I'm going to brush it to get the dirt off. And again, I keep a basket here. But I'll brush it with a scrub brush. Doesn't get it all off, but most of it. And then I'll use the scissors to cut off the roots. And then I'll cut the stem about 1 inch up. It's a little tough. Or the scissors are a little dull. Then we have the garlic heads filled with garlic cloves. If you're doing cooking and it calls for garlic cloves, it doesn't mean a whole head of garlic. It means just one of the pieces inside the head of garlic. Some people have made that mistake and ended up with a very garlicky dish. At any rate, the heads of garlic will be put in mesh bags, and I store those in my garage where it stays cool all winter, but it doesn't really freeze that solid. And I can have garlic then until spring. In October, I'll take out a few of these cloves and separate them and plant them about 6 to 12 inches apart, and that will be my crop for next year, along with any that I've ordered to have a new variety. Excuse me. So that's the garlic story, and we should have a nice crop this year, and garlic, as I said, into spring for use in the kitchen. I have a lot of impatiens, and this is a begonia around, and they have done extremely well. This one, again, is one that I held over. The impatiens we grew from seed that were started actually on my show in, I believe, February or March. We started a lot of impatiens. I think I grew about 40 different plants, one set of white and then one set of multicolored. I've added them to containers around the garden, and they really do add a lot of color, and they will be, again, discarded. They don't come in well, nor do they make good cuttings. So I will replant those. They grow very easily from seed if you have a nice spot indoors, and you too can grow your own impatiens. And it's kind of satisfying to see them grow. and prosper by midsummer. Now, I spend a lot of time in this chair, just sitting here, looking at my seed catalogs and having a drink or two of water or tea, usually, and enjoying the fish. It's a nice place to be. The fish help with the mosquitoes. I've also got a mosquito candle in my lantern that I can light and get a little more protection if I want to come out and do some reading. Now, let's go inside and see what we can cook up. We're going to go inside today. This is the first time we've been inside in a long time, and we're going to enjoy the air conditioning as we prepare something for dinner tonight. Today I'm in the kitchen and I'm preparing a hot weather meal that you can be made ahead and kept in the refrigerator until dinner time. This is handy if you have a busy day and want to prepare the meal early and then have it ready for maybe even guests or just your family when you get home, if you anticipate being home closer to dinner time. It's always nice to have something ready. And I'm going to start out with an hors d'oeuvre, and this can be made for a variety of things. And I'm using some spinach herb wraps. These happen to be gluten-free, not because I need gluten-free, but that's what I picked up at the store. And I'm using a spinach wrap. You could use a plain one. And what I'm going to do is coat this with cream cheese. And I got this idea from Aaron Gleason's Forest Farm or Forest cookbooks. And they're beautiful books, and she has a lot of they're vegetarian cookbooks and just really beautiful illustrations. They're worth getting from the library just to look at as well as cook from. But she had this idea, and I thought it was really rather interesting. And you spread the flatbread, wrap bread, first with cream cheese, and I'm using a light cream cheese, and then with pesto. And she used purchased pesto. However, I used my lemon basil to make pesto yesterday. Pesto is very easy to make in a food processor or blender, and you use the herb and garlic. I used pine nuts. You can also use almonds or walnuts. Cheese, Parmesan cheese, and olive oil, a little salt and pepper, and that is pesto. You combine it all together, and it gives a consistency. You can make it as smooth or as chunky as you like. Spread that with pesto, and then I'm going to use some of the cucumbers from my garden and add 3 strips of cucumber and roll it up. And then I wrapped one the other day, and I have it here, wrapped it in plastic wrap and refrigerated it. This one's been refrigerated overnight, and so you can refrigerate them for a while. They tend to get a little soggy, I think, in the refrigerator. Probably a little better fresh, but you can either serve them whole as a lunch item, or I liked making little spirals with it. And I think the fresh is going to work up a little better. You can put those on the plate. Again, the ends are a little different, and we'll slice this one too. Yes, the fresh ones do slice a little better. And we'll put some of them face up and some sideways. But we tried one last night and found it very tasty, and I think I'll be making them again, as long as I have plenty of cucumbers in the garden. So that's our hors d'oeuvre for the day, or lunch, as the case may be. Make a great picnic lunch. And the next thing I'm going to make is a salad, a dinner salad. And I'm going to start with a dish, and I have a square-sided dish. I'm making a layered salad. And let's move those out of the way. And I'll start with some chopped lettuce. You could use iceberg. I have lettuce that is from the garden that I chopped up, and I'm going to add about half of what I have in this bag to the bottom of my bowl. And the next thing I want to add are some hard-cooked eggs, and I have them right here, and I have a handy-dandy egg slicer, and I've peeled them already, but the egg slicer works very nicely to give you some nice slices. And if you can arrange those around the edge a little bit, it looks pretty good, I think. And I've got 2 eggs to slice and put in. I'll put the prettier slices around the outside. And here's another one. And a couple more slices on the edges. And some in the middle. And the next thing, I have cut up an avocado and into cubes, and I put a little lemon juice with it, and then excluded the air as much as possible from this little Ziploc bag. Air will oxidize the avocado, and it will turn a dark color brown, which we don't want. And then I'm going to add a chicken breast that's been cooked and cut in cubes. And then the rest of the lettuce. This is dinner, so we want it to be a rather loaded salad. And then I'm going to add about 4 slices of cooked and chopped bacon, and a cup of shredded Swiss cheese. And then we need to make a dressing for this salad. It's going to go in the refrigerator, and we could have added some salt and pepper along the way. I did not. I have plenty of salt for us in the, but you could, if you wish, salt the lettuce layers. I have some Italian dressing, and I have 3/4 of a cup of mayonnaise, and I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of Italian dressing to the mayonnaise. And stir that up well. I have 2 recipes for layered salads, and this is neither. I made this one up using kind of the idea from the 2 recipes that I have. I think you could modify it based on what you like. But the idea is to layer some vegetables and some protein, and then you cover it with a dressing. And the idea is to seal it with the dressing. And then I'll add some chives on top. We could have added sliced onions in it, but I thought I would add a goodly portion of chopped chives. When you're ready to serve this salad, you toss it all together and everything comes together, including the chives, which will give the onion flavor. And I can put a little garnish on that. You can put a nasturtium, maybe? Nasturtiums are edible flowers, by the way. And a little bit of basil. We did use Italian dressing, so I'll use a spot of basil in it as well. Now this can be covered with plastic wrap and go in the refrigerator until mealtime. And it's about as easy as it gets to get out a quick cold supper. Served with bread and probably a dish of sliced tomatoes. It makes a whole meal. It's always nice to add a flower arrangement, and this one is made with flowers I took from the garden and from the wild. The goldenrod is from the wild. Goldenrod is not what causes allergies. That is ragweed, and they bloom at the same time, only ragweed has green blossoms that are pretty unobtrusive. Goldenrod has bright yellow ones, so everybody blames goldenrod. But it's usually not goldenrod that's the problem, because goldenrod is insect pollinated and the ragweed is wind pollinated, hence it's in the air. So you're probably having allergy symptoms from ragweed, not goldenrod. I have zinnias, phlox, verbena, which is this little purple flower, some of the Allium millennium, and an echinacea, and one of the dahlias. And this is, my dahlias are just starting to come into their own, and by another 2 or 3 weeks, I'll have a whole row of dahlias of different colors in bloom. And this one is a clethra, and this is from the backyard in the shade garden, and it has a delightful vanilla fragrance. It's a bush, and I really love it. If you drive or walk through wetlands during this time of year, over at Stony Brook is a good example, you'll smell this lovely floral scent, and that's the clethra. And it's a nice shrub to have. I particularly enjoy the scent, and so I've planted a few around my backyard where it is a little damp. So we have a nice flower arrangement to go with our dinner, and we need a dessert, and I baked this one yesterday, and it's a peach tart. The recipe for this can be found on the Land of Lakes butter website. I just looked up peach tart, and the Land of Lakes is the one that came into my browser. I made it just as the recipe called for in the 9-inch tart pan, and it has an almond crust, which was very easy to put together and pat into the pan. And then I topped it with a few raspberries from my garden. I'm getting just a few raspberries every 2 days, so I thought it was a nice accent for this peach tart. So there we have a quick meal. At least it's quick when you go to serve it. That's been prepared ahead of time and kept in the refrigerator. I'm Liz Davey. You've been watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable.